Welcome to the FOAC-ILEA podcast. We are coming to you from the Great American Outdoors Show in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And we're sitting right now at the FOAC booth. A little bit, in a turn of phrase, you're on the opposite side of being interviewed today.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing for me.
A new dynamic.
A new dynamic, yes.
But I'm Stephen LaSpina. I'm on the FOAC-ILEA Board of Directors, and I'm sitting with our Vice President, Klint Macro. So, Klint, thanks for sitting down with me today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for doing it, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I thought it would be fun for the viewers, many of whom I'm sure are members, but there may be some that don't know who Klint Macro is and what you're all about. So why don't you introduce us to who you are?
I'm just a guy, dude. I'm Augie's dad. I'm Jen's husband. I'm Carol and Ken's son. I've spent a lot of my life helping people to exercise their rights. Earlier on in my life, it was exercise the First Amendment. And as I've gotten older, God has pushed me in a direction to where I'm better served helping people exercise their Second Amendment. Okay. So yeah, I do a lot, man. You do a lot of things.
You wear a lot of hats. So tell us about Trigger Pressers Union.
Well, that was my training company that I started in 2013. Prior to that, I was an instructor, just like Klint, the instructor. Mm-hmm. And in 2013, I formally set up the Trigger Pressers Union and got the website set up. And I actually ran it as a sole proprietorship for a couple of years, which wasn't the smartest thing tax-wise. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to help people to better defend themselves. Prior to that, I was doing a lot of safety and marksmanship training, like NRA basic pistol kind of stuff. And I wasn't as focused on the defensive aspect of it. I was just how to shoot better was kind of what I was into. And I did a class and one woman said, because of what you taught me today, I'll never be a victim again. And I was like, I really kind of analyzed what she said. I'm like, wow, there's a lot going on here. Like there's a great deal of responsibility what I'm doing here. And it was about that time when I think it being divine intervention, I came upon Rob Pincus's teaching. And shortly after that, I saw the USCCA curriculum, both of which were very pivotal in my development. And that's when I kind of started to be more of a student of teaching defensive tactics. Being someone that's not a LE or military, that's just not really where my head was ever at. And it was interesting. It's been an ongoing process.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think too, in the training space, it's very rewarding to have those moments with students when they come to you and say, hey, this has made me a better protector, or I feel more prepared if I were to face a threat. There's something very rewarding about that. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, well I mean, we get into our rhythm, we kind of get our show kind of perfected, so to speak. We learn the curriculum really well, so we don't have to pay attention so closely to the PowerPoint or to the notebook or whatever. And we just kind of get into our rhythm. And you're like, all right, that felt good. People were sitting there, they were awake. It was a good class, everyone stayed awake, right? People took notes. But when someone takes the time to pull you aside afterwards and give you that level of intimate information and how maybe something I just did was life-changing is really humbling. Yeah. And it really shows that we as educators and mentors, we serve a higher purpose than just helping people to be more proficient.
Yeah. There is a higher purpose to it.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about Second Amendment activism. Yeah. How did you become Vice President of Firearms Owners Against Crime, ILEA?
Well, actually, it started in Los Angeles when I was working in the studio industry.
Okay.
I was very, very vocal about the National Rifle Association. And really at the time, it was the only organization that was, pro-gun organization that I was even aware of, to be quite honest. And when I had NRA signs at my studio. I know I lost work because of that. And I was kind of militant about it. I get in people's faces, like, why are you anti-gun? And California at the time was much more pro-gun than it is now, but it was still terribly anti-gun by comparison to Pennsylvania, where I had moved from.
Now, how long ago are we talking, so folks understand?
Well, I moved to California. I left Pennsylvania, moved to California in 97.
Okay.
And then I left in 2010 to move back to Pennsylvania.
So almost 30 years ago.
Yeah. And it was a different landscape.
Sure.
You could still go to Big Five Sporting Goods and buy, and I didn't, and I wish I would have. You could get like an an M1 carbine for $400.
Wow.
They had trash cans of M1 carbines for $400, and that's even expensive compared to some, you talk to folks that are a little older than that, they, surplus guns. But yeah, so it was, it was really, California kind of did its flip more after the bank robbery in '94.
Yeah.
So I was getting there as things were really starting to kind of tighten up by comparison. I mean, prior to that, you could buy semi-automatic, there was really very, very little regulation when it came from the state. Of course, I came in, during the Clinton ban, so, you couldn't get certain things, but that was nationwide.
Yeah. I think we tend to forget that this is a state Ronald Reagan won.
Yeah.
California wasn't always the California that we think of today.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you go to California now even, there's LA, there's Sacramento, there's, San Francisco, San Diego that are very, very blue.
Right.
And again, not that, FOAC, we're not partisan, but really honestly, blue now kind of equates to anti-gun. It's pretty much the trend.
Sure.
But you get out of those areas, it's red everywhere else.
Right.
There's a lot of gun owners in California, a lot of people that want to exercise their rights, and a lot of people that just want to have them for various reasons.
Sure. But here you were in a very admittedly anti-gun environment with your NRA signs in the studio.
Definitely an anti-gun industry too.
Sure.
Suzanne Plachette came in to do voiceover for a show I was doing. If you don't know who she is, she was kind of like a big soap opera star back in the day. She came in and I happened to have a shotgun leaning in the corner. We were doing Foley, which is like making sound effects for movies. Sure. So in the movie, the guy had a shotgun, so I just used the shotgun. Of course, it was cleared, but we were recording like racking the slide and doing all kinds of stuff with it. And I had it leaning in the corner, and she came in and she did one of these. It's not a gun! And she refused to work with me, and she left. And so they had to do her voiceover at another studio. So yeah, I ran into some things like that. There were some other actors, some folks that you really wouldn't think would be pro-gun. And they actually were and carried guns, and I'd say to them, why don't you speak out about this? I'd never work in this town again. So a lot of, if you equate gun rights to conservatism, which is quite often the case, a lot of conservative people in Hollywood, at least at that time, and I think now, they're there, they just...
Mum's the word.
They just don't talk about it. They feel that they should just leave it alone and not get involved. And I was the opposite. I'm like, you have power, man. People listen to you. You should get involved. And so that's where I started. I came at it with that mindset. And of course, we ended up moving back to Pennsylvania. And one of the very first things I did when I came back to PA was there was a Tea Party rally at Bushy Run Battlefield outside of Greensburg. And I think we had been back to Pennsylvania for a very short time. We came back, we were living in my sister-in-law's basement, and my job was to find a house that had the space that I could put my recording studio in. Sure. Because that was my only source of income at the time. And I saw this Tea Party rally thing, and I was kind of into that, and so I went to it. And I was walking around, I had Augie and a little baby buggy pushing around. Matter of fact, there's a picture of him and I eating apples sitting there at that rally. But I came around the corner, and there was FOAC. Huh. And Kim Stolfer was there, and Ed Steffen was there. Ed Steffen has been a volunteer with the organization over the years. Most recently, he was vice president of Allegheny County Sportsman's League. But Ed was there, and Ed always would carry like a full auto machine gun on his chest to kind of poke the bear. And of course, Kim was there. And I came over, and I'm talking to him, and he was telling me what FOAC was all about. And I said, yeah, I'd like to get involved and help out. And he goes, when? He said, you just said you'd like to get involved and help out. When do you want to do it? And he like totally threw me on the spot. I'm like, what can I do now? He says, well, you can join. Why don't you join right now? Okay. And he says, how can you help out? And I said, I can teach, I can do this, I do. Okay. Like he held my feet to the fire. And so I really was really kind of respected that. Yeah. Now I'm sure I know Kim would do that with people all the time and never hear anything back, but I felt duty bound as a human being to call him up. And I think like a couple days later, I called him up and I said, when are the meetings? Can I get involved? Anything I can do? Can I send emails? Whatever. And that's kind of how it started out. He had done several events with elected officials. Representative Pyle, who's passed. he would do a machine gun shoot every year, and so he'd call me up and say, hey, can you round up some folks to be RSOs? And sure, no problem, Kim, I'll be there. And he was doing the seminars. I had helped out with a couple of those early on, but I just because of scheduling and stuff, I wasn't able to make all of them. And yeah, so I was doing that. Chip was the vice president, Chip Gallo. He was the vice president of Firearms Owners Against Crime, and he was also on the board with Allegheny County Sportsman's League. And I was a board member of Allegheny County Sportsman's League. There was an opening came up for board of directors at FOAC, and Chip said, I think you should throw your name in the hat. And I said, well, you guys meet on Saturdays or Sundays, right, on the weekend. At the time, at that time I was teaching and doing sessions, so that was I was working, right? And he says, yep. And I said, I will never, ever make a meeting. It'll never happen. But I will help any way that I can. And I said, I would be honored to throw my hat in. But just so everyone is perfectly clear, I will never, ever make a meeting. He says, all right. So he threw my name in the hat. Kim gives me a call, and we talked a little bit. And so he appointed me. And so I was able to be appointed at that point in time. And then from there, it just became a little more responsibility, God rest his soul, Kim did not delegate well, but when he did delegate, he expected it to be done now.
Yes.
And I think one of the fortunate things for the relationship was, as I had at that time worked for myself solely, I could choose to do it right now. I could drop what I was doing in many cases and just work on it. Hey, we got to send out email blasts because there's a bill moving tomorrow. Can you get that? I can do it right now. I'll drop what I'm doing, or I can get to it in an hour or so, or I will do it in the morning. And so that really helped strengthen things. In the meantime, I had been kind of raising in the ranks at Allegheny County Sportsman's League. And for those that don't know, FOAC started as the legislative committee for Allegheny County Sportsman's League. The league was first, and then FOAC kind of split off from that. Kim was the chair of the legislative committee with the county league for many, many years. So there's always been this kind of cross synergy that has gone on with the organization. When Pittsburgh did its illegal preemption violation in 2019, I was kind of thrown into the president's seat. I was at that time, I think I was second vice president. Maybe I was vice president. Anyhow, everything shuffled around. They're like, Klint's going to do it, and the reason was at the time, as I understand it, the current president wasn't ready to just throw down the money and do the lawsuit. And I thought, we got the money in the bank, we need to do this. So he stepped down, people moved aside, whatever, and here's Klint throwing it. Maybe they did it because Klint doesn't know any better, and give it to Mikey, he'll eat it, kind of thing,
He'll write the check.
Yeah. So there's a picture. I won't say it's a famous picture, but it's one of my favorite pictures. I'm sitting here writing a check, and all the guys are standing around me, and it was putting Josh Prince on retainer, and it was a pretty big check. And I remember signing the thing, going, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, man. You know what I mean? So consulting with Kim. And consulting with Josh Prince and his team, they kind of walked me through that and held my hand as we went through that process. So at that time, because FOAC was suing and County League was suing, and I was on the board with FOAC, but I was the president of County League, we had a lot of communication. Every day we spoke for multiple hours, and we gained a little bit of a bigger rapport. So shortly after that, Kim was able to delegate the newsletter duties and things like that to me, and so that was pretty cool.
Yeah. So to rewind,
yeah,
your activism started at a show just like you and I are sitting at today.
Absolutely.
Where we have people walking up to a booth.
Yep.
You and I and some wonderful volunteers here have been telling people about the mission of FOAC. And what would you say if someone walked up right now as a young person and said, hey, how do I get involved with Second Amendment activism? What advice would you give them?
I would say you just started right now. You just started right now talking to me. What can you do? What do you want to do? What are your talents? Do you want to write a big check, or do you got talents and treasure? Time. What is it? Time, talents, and treasure, right? Yeah, that would be what I'd say. I mean, a lot of times people, and it's because folks have lives. I think a lot of folks in this world are able to do what they do because they don't have other other commitments. I mean, Jim Stoker, for instance, our president, he's done amazing things since he took over, but he just recently retired.
Sure.
So that's certainly freed up some time. Although he wasn't retired the first couple months.
That's true.
So I know he was sending emails and driving his police car with his feet, doing stuff like that. So, that's not always the case, but to be able to like stop and work on things is very helpful.
And that's a common thing we hear. I know I hear it from folks. Hey, that's a retired person's game. Or
But
that's
it's not
somebody with
always,
grown
though.
kids. So
It's not
how would
always.
you respond to that objection?
Yeah, I mean, what can you do and do it?
Yeah.
We move mountains one shovelful at a time, or we blow it up with dynamite. Those are your two choices, right? But incrementalism, a little bit of working here, a little bit, just a commitment. Like when I was in the music industry in a band, it was always every day you need to do one thing to help the band, whatever it is. Like send out, post some flyers, maybe book a gig, whatever.
Yeah.
Do one thing every day, and if you can be disciplined as a volunteer for an organization such as ours, you can move the truck forward just by doing one thing every day. So maybe that's, I'll check some emails, or I'll find some cool articles to post, or I'll write an article, or I'll whatever.
Right.
But identify that, know what your mission is, and just do it.
Yeah.
And then you may find as your infrastructure becomes a thing and you're more efficient, you may have more time. Or you may like, you know what? I think I'll do this too. I mean, you teach home defense. A lot of times we'll talk to people about home defense, and one of the real simple things everyone says is, hey, those little screws holding the latch plate of your front door, they're probably only 1/4 inch. Why don't you take them out and put longer screws in there? That's going to make your door 7 to 10 times stronger.
Sure.
And just by telling people that, I've had so many folks come back and say, you know what? You were right. I did that. What else can I do? So I think if you do get involved with an organization, you have limited resource of time, be upfront about that and say, here's what I can do. And pick something that's doable. Don't overpromise, and do it. And then I bet if you're passionate, or if you become more efficient, you may find that you can do more. But even if you can't, that's fine. Because if people are counting on you to do that thing, then that thing is important.
Yeah.
And
So
it needs to be done.
don't overcommit to too much, but really commit to the thing you can do.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what I hear you saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Either that, or just don't sleep and don't talk to your family or anything like that, which is not good quality of
We
life.
wouldn't recommend that.
I don't recommend that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're family guys ourselves.
Yeah.
We've got, people that are counting on us and relying on us, and other obligations outside of this.
Yeah.
But this is a passion project because it's important.
Absolutely.
And it's part of being a good citizen.
Yeah.
I think that's something we've lost, where we don't value what our forefathers did and the pains and toils that they went through in order to secure what we have. We kind of just take it for granted. We thought we could put the Republic on autopilot, but we can't.
Yeah, but when you put it on autopilot, the thing that's driving it is the government.
Yes.
And inherently, it's not that the government is inherently bad, but when the government is left to its own devices, sometimes they kind of forget what the government is supposed to be there for.
Speaking of timing, we're sitting, 2 weeks into a new administration at the federal government in 2025. And part of what that administration is doing is going line by line through the federal budget, looking at how things are being spent. And some of the things that we've come out with, everyone has said waste, fraud, and abuse for years.
Oh, yeah.
But we're finding now it was to levels that we hadn't even imagined.
Unbelievable.
To your point.
Unbelievable. Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, incredible.
So
amount
you
of
wonder
waste.
how much that is at the state level. You wonder, right? So, we had a really fantastic federal election. I think most people that are in the gun space would agree with that.
Sure.
And so far it seems as if Trump is delivering on pretty much everything that he said he was going to do, or the things he hasn't got to yet, you can only assume he's going to get there, because, whoo, man, I can't imagine, like all this stuff, he's just checking the box,
Things
right?
are moving quickly.
Yeah, and so that's refreshing. On the other hand, we have to keep an eye out that it doesn't go too far, because there's always a balance. But so far, everything that I'm aware of has been to minimize government and to make it smaller. And I think I fundamentally believe that's the right way to go about it. The federal government should be there to protect the borders and protect the citizens.
Yeah, enumerated powers that's its function.
Yeah. So statewide, though, a lot of people have this euphoria that woohoo! But statewide, we really didn't gain any ground. pro-gun wise.
Yeah.
We did actually pick up one seat, but the balance of power, once it all said and done, is pretty much the same as it was pre-election. And so we got 102 to 101. We still have a very pro-gun Democrat in the Johnstown area. His name is escaping me.
Frank Burns.
Frank Burns, yes. Excuse me. Yeah, Frank Burns. So he's been very consistent with voting pro-gun, but unfortunately, as we said before, we're not partisan, but the Democratic leadership that's in place is vehemently anti-gun. So the fact that he's there changes the dichotomy to where they're in control of the calendar, what gets pushed through committee.
Right.
So I would hate to see him go because he's a very pro-gun person, but the current political landscape, it would have been nice had he lost the seat to a Republican, and then we would have gone back to having control of the calendar.
So speak to the skeptics in our audience who are watching, and it's easy to get skeptical with politics, so I don't blame them. But speak to people who say, hey, I'm tired of voting for Republicans who just get in there and always make an excuse for why we can't do something. Now, there are some legitimate challenges. I think people realize, well, we don't have the governor's mansion. That's a huge problem for signing legislation. But there's a fatigue with people, I think, to some extent, at least that I've heard from,
That's
who've
fair.
said, how do we negotiate this? Because I might have a favorite Republican at the national level, whether it's a Trump or a DeSantis or somebody that I can get behind, a J.D. Vance, somebody who's refreshing and doing things. But man, there's so many Republicans all over that don't do what they say they should do. How should we think about that as citizens in an electorate?
Well, you got to look at things long game. I say this after witnessing what Trump is doing right now federally, but generally speaking, in politics and in government, nothing happens overnight. It takes a long time. And as you said, right now our political landscape is the House. We could maybe defeat some anti-gun stuff, and there's like last session we defeated a couple, but there were some things that made it through the House. Now, granted, current landscape, is it going to go through the Senate? Probably not. I don't ever want to say yes, we're good. But the likelihood of something getting through Judiciary Committee or getting put on a floor vote in the Senate right now with current leadership is very, very, very slim.
Yeah.
However, if it did make it through, would our governor sign it? And I think largely based upon what he has said and has done as Attorney General, he would probably sign anti-gun legislation. So, when we look at pushing pro-gun legislation right now, I talked to a few different legislators here today, even have some pro-gun things that they're pushing forth, and absolutely will support them. But is it worth kind of putting your neck on the line long game, knowing that it's not going to get signed by the governor? Or without knowing, hey, there's a way we can discuss this with the governor. The one thing about Shapiro is, and Kim always said this, is when it comes to fiscal things, he might be more approachable. So at one point in time, Kim thought that maybe Shapiro would be more amicable to getting rid of the PIC system, because he understands it runs concurrent with NICS. It really doesn't give us any value when it comes to stopping crime, and it costs the state money.
Yeah.
So if it were to actually get through the House and the Senate, perhaps he might sign it, because it's hey, this is saving the state money. Sure. And XYZ.
Sure.
And oh, by the way, if you do this, it might make it easier for you to run for president someday. I'm told that's a good thing to say to him as well too. I don't know. I've not met Governor Shapiro personally.
Fair.
So anyhow, we got to look at things long game. So if I put all of my eggs into this basket and hit it really hard, is it ultimately going to be worth the squeeze if I'm very unlikely to be able to move it down here? When we put through constitutional carry in 23, we had a pretty good idea that we weren't going to be able to overturn the veto. And we had a pretty good idea that Wolf was going to veto it. So it was not a big surprise that he did. Now, the reason for that then was to call some people on the carpet to make sure that they were voting the way they should. So the votes got forced, and it did actually make it through the House and Senate at that time. But we weren't really terribly surprised that he was going to veto it. Now, had we not had any clue about the math afterwards, that might have been folly to run that. Right? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's a strategy in running legislation at certain times.
Yeah, and so you got to look at the long game. And it goes back to the court cases. People want to hoorah, and change things right now. Well, it takes time. Folks right now are talking about national reciprocity. course, that's not something we're necessarily engaged in here because we're a state level organization, but absolutely, we would come out in favor of national reciprocity, and I would put it in the, we would advise people to contact their federal reps. A lot of people are saying, well, we shouldn't do it because here's what's going to happen in this state and that state, and they're going to ignore it. We saw this with Bruin. Sure. I'm like, no, we need to do it so that they can't ignore it, so that we can take it to court, and 10 years from now, it'll all be fixed.
Yeah.
But unless we push that now, when are we going to get that chance again?
Yeah.
Will Vance win in 28? Will we take the House and the Senate in 28? I don't know that. Right now, we have the best chance ever of getting national reciprocity pushed. The math is such that it's possible it could go through the House, possible. Yep. The Senate, probably it would pass, and Trump, without question, I think, so far he's showing he is a man of his word in this current administration, that he would sign it.
Yeah.
So I think we should push it, knowing fully well that, hey, we're going to have court cases out the wazoo.
Right. On the federal level, on that issue, the wind seems to be at our backs.
Yeah, and so we got to look at that here in Pennsylvania too, when we look at legislation that's coming up, whatever that might be. So, hey, is it worth sticking your neck out over this and causing a problem that may end up ultimately losing someone's seat that could turn the balance back over to the anti-gun establishment?
Right.
So last year in 2024, some of the anti-gun bills that were pushed through the House, they were forcing the vote so that they could get Republicans in purple districts to kind of stand up on their backside about whether they're pro-gun or not. Right. And if they knew it wasn't going to pass the Senate, some of them decided to kind of abstain or not or vote against, knowing fully well that it's not going to make it through the Senate. That was a long game approach that a lot of people don't agree with.
Sure.
But we ended up not losing more seats in this last election. So there's a lot of inside baseball that goes with it, and whether or not that should be the case, that is politics. And frankly, everyone talks about the government. You get 4 people together, there is always going to be politics. 2 people together, there's going to be politics.
Yeah.
So I think the important thing is to look at things long game. And, that's not always pretty.
Yeah.
It's not always pretty. And sometimes you got to kind of swallow it. Like, I really want to punch this guy, but I'm not going to, because I know down the road he's going to help convince that guy to vote the way we need him to vote.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's helpful. And I think, too, part of this is we're suffering from our own apathy as a movement. If gun owners were loud when it came to contacting representatives and things, I think we've made significant improvements even in the last 10 years.
Yeah, we definitely saw some differences in the last election.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But we didn't get to where we are with all the infringements that we have in Pennsylvania and nationally overnight. It took a lot of years of just being quiet, right? And so politicians are people that are responding to constituents, right? And whoever's kind of the louder voice.
Squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yeah, so those purple districts, right? If the voices are louder than ours that oppose our rights, who are they going to listen to? So I think it's a good reminder for gun owners to speak up, right?
Yeah, and also you got to understand too, there are bad, evil legislators. I absolutely believe that. There are also bad, evil plumbers and bad, evil, pick a vocation, right? But most of the elected officials, they're there because they wanted to do something good somewhere, somehow. And you gotta kind of, what's the Errol Morris movie, Fog of War? It talks with McNamara, who is Secretary of Defense under Kennedy. Great documentary. But he says one of his rules is you must empathize with your enemy. Not that the elected officials are actually my enemy, but we're looking at opposing sides of an argument here.
Sure.
So, you look at these folks, they have to be an expert on guns, drilling, healthcare, abortion, whatever, you name it. You name any group that's going to be there, like, hey, we need you to do, they got to be experts on all that stuff.
Yeah.
And they can't, they physically can't. So they rely on other folks to give them the best information they have, and they're going to rely on the people that offer them the best information.
Right.
Unless they are politically one-sided. We certainly know a few people in the Commonwealth that I can give them all the fact sheets, Jim can write them white papers, we can look at video and evidence, and they're like, no, guns are the scourge of the earth, we need your whatever. That'll be their company line. But most of them, they want to get advice, and a lot of gun owners won't communicate with their elected officials.
Yeah.
But every town will, Moms Demand Action will,
Ceasefire
Ceasefire PA will,
Yep.
and they gladly give literature, and they spend time with them, and they take, they do workshops, and they try to educate them. And that's something that we've been very good to do, but when we ask our members to get involved, well, I think our members have been pretty responsive.
I think
overall.
our members are responsive.
Yeah, most certainly.
Yeah.
But the average gun owner,
The average gun owner,
they're like,
we're speaking about.
I don't want to talk to them.
Yeah.
And actually Senator Dush said something in a meeting, you were there, that was really kind of poignant. He says he thought that a lot of gun owners don't get involved because most gun owners are like, we want to be left alone just in general. And if I talk to them or I register to vote, now I'm part of the problem because I'm kind of part of the government.
I'm in the system,
yeah,
so
right?
to speak.
And it's actually really quite the opposite.
Yeah.
So
Our system doesn't work without that involvement.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we talked earlier on, people talk about term limits.
Sure.
Yeah, okay, on the top, on its surface, I understand. Term limits, that makes sense. But really and honestly, we don't need term limits if everyone paid attention to what the elected officials were doing and voted accordingly.
We have elections.
That is the term limit.
We can limit terms at any point.
That's Jefferson's bloodless revolution every year, every 4 years, whatever the particular office is. So I think people do need to be more involved. And the thing is, if you don't know your elected official, like we've got a database of that, but it's not hard to find it out.
Sure.
And contact them. Call them up. Just, hey, my name is Klint and I just wanted to talk to you. They will listen to you.
Yeah.
They will make the time available to you and let them know what you're about. And if that person is pro-gun or if they're just open-minded, then educate them. If they're anti-gun, then I say be an absolute pain in their ass. Like show up all the time and like be a pain in their butt. And there's certainly cases with Kim, for instance, where he had taken it upon himself to really be a pain in the butt to some of those anti-gun legislators back in the day and actually got them to turn over.
Yeah.
Melissa Schusterman, who's not a pro-gun person at all, a representative from the eastern side of the state. I would visit her office from time to time. You've come with me a couple times. We would be cordial, but there was no way we were going to convince either of anything. And but I tried to maintain a rapport. And I don't know if she remembered me or not. Maybe she remembered the organization. But I would stop by and she'd say, "Come on in, sit down. What's going on? She'd say, "What are you going to try to convince me of this time?" That kind of stuff. Well, because of that rapport, I went in one time and she said, "Tell me about Sunday hunting." Which is something FOAC supported. It wasn't a huge thing that we were supporting, but we wrote a paper, yes, we support it. Of course, County League was all over that. We want Sunday hunting is the thing we wanted. So she kind of threw me off, like, what? Like she came to me with a question. But had I not built that rapport, I don't know if she would have even bothered,
Sure.
So even if they're anti-gun, talk to them. Another thing that's good about the anti-gun people, I'll say this is a good thing. If you talk to them, you can get their talking points.
Yeah.
Go talk to 3 anti-gun politicians and you will hear the same talking points. And then go into the 4th one and try to throw them off of their talking points. You're not going to make them more anti-gun.
Right.
So I kind of look at it as a free time up at bat, right?
There's very little to lose and you get better at crafting your own arguments and responding to theirs.
Yeah, so if you say something stupid or bonehead, what's it matter? They're still anti-gun, right? Not that we want to say things stupid. But try to get them off their game. And then when you do talk to someone that's somewhere in the middle and then they're, all they have in their head are those talking points and we can get them off of that and redirect. It's like a chess game, man.
Yeah. And be respectful, be cordial, but also go in knowing some things. We have resources on our website that people can access, the white papers you mentioned that Jim writes, and we post articles that talk about these issues. So there's no need to go in there without those things. But yeah, like you said, even if you have to follow up with an email later, great.
Yeah.
Hey, I thought about what you said. I did some more research and here's some stuff. And now that's coming into their office and being communicated to them. So there's ways to go about it.
Absolutely.
And not be timid.
And if you ever want to talk to an elected official about a particular point or a particular bill, piece of legislation, whatever, like contact us. We'll school you up. I know, I know Kim has done it, Jim has done it, I have done it, I know you have done it, where members have reached out to us and say, hey, I want to talk to this guy about that. and we'll give you all the information you need. Absolutely.
Gladly.
Absolutely. We appreciate it when people will step up and do that, because if there are more of us standing up with a unified front, I think we have much better chance of overturning tyranny or potential tyranny that could happen from apathy or from just complete government overreach.
Yeah. Last political question. 5 years, Klint Macro's crystal ball is out. Where do you see the state of Second Amendment politics in Pennsylvania?
Wow, 5 years?
5 years.
Well, that's hard to say. I think 5 years from now, it's going to be interesting. It depends who the Republicans run against Shapiro.
Okay.
Shapiro will run again unless he gets an appointment.
Sure.
I think if he were offered an appointment, I think he would probably take it, because that would get him closer to the White House. And again, I don't know Josh Shapiro, so I'm not speaking like negatively. I'm trying to be respectful, but from what I understand of him and what I've seen just reading between the lines and folks that I do know that know him, his aspiration is to be president someday. I believe that to be the case. So I can see if there was an opportunity for him to get into that kind of world to where that could be a little closer for him. I mean, we saw this actually. Frankly, if Kamala would have picked him as his running mate, I think that election, I would still like to say she still would have lost, but it would have been a very different situation.
Yeah,
would Pennsylvania had gone if Shapiro was the vice presidential candidate? Because he's popular. I think that's fair to say. So that's a thing. So, but if you want me to purely speculate,
sure.
There'll be peace on earth. Everyone will hold hands, sing kumbaya.
Goodwill toward men.
Good, and rabbits and ducks under rainbows will shoot at the rifle range, and ammo will be free. That's.
I want to live in your world, Klint Macro. That sounds like a good place to be. I thought it would be fun to close things out with a lightning round.
A lightning round.
A lightning round.
Oh, wow.
So
this is pretty good.
Gotten some questions here for you, and I want you to just. First thing that comes to your mind.
Oh my.
Right?
This could be dangerous.
This isn't dangerous at all. Your favorite gun to shoot?
Favorite gun to shoot?
Favorite gun to shoot.
I like shooting flintlocks.
All right.
Yeah, I enjoy shooting flint. It's labor intensive and messy, but there's a certain satisfaction of loading up a flintlock and actually hitting what you're shooting at.
Okay. Easiest gun to shoot?
Easiest gun.
This is for Klint, not universally. Just
I would say the Glock platform.
Okay.
Or most any modern striker-fired semi-automatic polymer gun in 9mm lacking a thumb safety.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Very, very easy for people to shoot. Now, to shoot well, AR-15 platform by far.
Okay.
Now, you got to take the safety on and off. That's something that has to be done to make the gun go bang. But as far as just mount it to your body and face, put it in front of you and hitting what you're shooting at, I think the AR platform is by far the easiest to master in the shortest amount of time.
Okay. A gun you'd never get rid of?
Never get rid of.
Your personal collection?
Gun I'd never get rid of in my personal collection. Well, I do have an old 22 that was my grandpap's. Now, years ago, I had quite a few guns from my grandpap and my father, and in a moment of financial weakness, I lost a bunch of them, but I still had that 22. And yeah, I will, and I don't say this term, but that one is from my cold dead hands.
There you
go. Nowhere. Yeah.
Very good. How about worst gun or least favorite you've ever shot?
Oh, Para Ordnance Warthog, without question. It was a neat concept. Now, it was at a time when I thought like the 1911 platform was the way to go. It's a subcompact, well, maybe not quite subcompact, but it's a compact 1911, but it had a double stack magazine, Para Ordnance. They were known for their double stack 1911s. That thing was a single shot pistol. I sent it back to the factory and I'm clamping on it. I'd have other people shoot it, pow, and it would still pow. And I was like, and when I sent it to the factory, they're like, well, you're limp wristing it. Like, no, I'm not. Like, I maybe had at one time, like in a string of fire, but no, I'm telling you, there's something wrong with this.
Amazing.
And so as soon as they sent it back, pop, 2 single shots out of it. I packed it up with a bunch of magazines and I went to a local store and I said, I want to trade this for whatever you want to trade me. And I got rid of it.
Wow. Yeah. All right, last one. I think this is going to be a good one. Best class, firearms class you've ever taken?
Oh, best class I ever taken. Well, I gotta say, as far as, I'm gonna say this is a tie. I'm gonna take an easy way out of this. I'm gonna say it's a tie.
Well, I'll allow it.
The first class I took with Rob Pincus, intuitive defensive shooting. Now, Rob was kind of curmudgeonly and kind of crusty at that class, but I left there going, wow, I am capable of so much, and I love this methodology, and it makes so much sense to me. And I say that ties with Masad Ayyub's Deadly Force instructor class that I took. That one, just because he is such a wealth of knowledge, and my ability to articulate legal concepts and the law after taking his class was leaps and bounds. It was so eye-opening, and I saw the folly in the way I was articulating a lot of different things legally. And not just legally, but just defensive in nature. I was in my seminar today, I talked about, can you articulate? And I stole that from Masad. CYA, what's CYA stand for? Everyone says cover your ass. It's no, can you articulate?
Yeah.
Because ultimately that's what it comes down to. Whether it's right, wrong, or otherwise, we have to articulate it, and people have to agree with what we articulate is reasonable. If not, we may check the box, do everything right, but if we can't articulate in a way that sounds reasonable, we're very likely going to be charged and convicted of a crime at that point, especially if there's politics behind the prosecutor and all that stuff, which is quite often the case in many jurisdictions. So I would say Pincus's first class that I did with him, and I want to say that was back in 2012 I hosted him, 11 or 12 I think. I know I hosted him before I formally set up Trigger Pressers Union. I'm pretty sure. I could be mistaken about that, but it was close to that time.
So it stood the test of time. We're going back 13 years.
And I tell you what, I've done, I want to say 17, I was his student 17 times, I think. Plus I've worked with some of his other masters. Of course, I became kind of a master instructor in one of his methodologies as well. So I drank that Kool-Aid a long time ago.
Sure.
It was life-changing.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Well, this has been fun. A little bit of getting to know Klint Macro and what makes you tick and everything you do here at FOAC. We've touched on politics, we've touched on guns, and all the things we're passionate about. And it's been a distinct honor and privilege. So thanks for sitting down.
Thank you, man.
All right.
This was a great time.
Stay tuned for more content from the FOAC-ILEA podcast.